Saskatchewan, the land of the living skies, would look like a desert of minimal growth to any form. However, this land is home and farmland to the people of Saskatchewan. The farmers of the land work hard to ensure their production of wheat, barley, oats, canola, flax, and durum is of the highest quality. But the question remains, how natural are their methodologies for producing those crops? Hi everybody, my name is Jaden Nickel.
And my name is Alex Bosson, and we're seeking to answer the questions you may have about genetic modification, natural or organic foods, and how organic A&W burgers are.
Join us on our scientifically based research adventure as we try to answer the question of GMO?
Part of the reason we wanted to look at these facts is that we're becoming teachers, and we want to ensure that our students are informed regarding topical and political issues such as these.
Yeah, and additionally we wanted to see how easy it would be to fit our students and get our students to genetically modify plants or fruits that we have in our classroom to see and visualize the benefits and cool features of what genetic modification can do. Kind of looking at like the direct applications of genetic modification to a garden in our classroom and surrounding our building with demonstrative learning purposes.
We also wanted to revisit indigenous agriculture and relate it to our current Western science methods of agriculture.
Furthermore, as people with science and math backgrounds, we wanted to look at the science behind genetic modification.
Lastly, because it directly relates to genetic modifications, we wanted to look at A&W's steroid and hormone-free campaign and discuss genetic modification in that light.
So the questions we hope to answer are, what is genetic modification?
How do we and how can we genetically modify our plants at home?
How can we bring genetic modification into the classroom?
And finally, are A&W burgers healthier or safer because of the lack of genetic modification on the livestock?
And our goal is to do this all within the scope of food literacy, food sovereignty, and food production.
Join us on our adventure to answer the questions, what are GMOs and are they dangerous to eat? So the first question that we want to ask is, what is genetic modification? Genetically modified organisms, or GMOs, are living organisms whose genetic material has been artificially manipulated in a laboratory through genetic engineering. This creates combinations of plants, animals, bacteria, and viruses that do not occur naturally or through traditional crossbreeding methods.
Genetic modification is the introduction of new traits to an organism by making changes directly to its genetic makeup.
Because of evolving and adapting species, genetic modification has been happening naturally in plants, animals, and viruses since the dawn of time. A practical example of animals experiencing natural genetic modification comes in the form of fish. Typically, seawater freezes at minus 1.9 degrees Celsius, a temperature so cold that fish would die if the water were to ever reach that temperature.
Yet, every winter on Saskatchewan lakes, you can witness people fishing and catching live fish. How does that happen?
To survive the cold Canadian temperatures, over time, fish adapted to their host environment, a form of natural genetic modification. This allowed them to produce something called Antifreeze Proteins, or AFP. These proteins mimic an ice layer surface to bind to the surrounding water molecules and prevent them from freezing. This allows the fish to survive at much colder temperatures.
It's been discovered that insects and beetles also have these proteins in their system that allow them to survive extreme cold temperatures as well.
These proteins were extracted from fish and beetles and inserted into carrots to allow them to survive at much colder temperatures. Carrots usually die after hitting the freezing point of 0 degrees Celsius. So by inserting this antifreeze protein, if a sudden cold hits the Saskatchewan prairies, the carrots can survive and be sold, and farmers do not lose a profit.
So that begs the question, is this genetic modification bad? Are these carrots no longer natural?
Organic is a commonly used, seemingly hipster buzzword, just used to make something sound more natural. If we take a chemistrian approach, organic simply means that these carrots contain carbon. So yes, they're still organic.
If we take a biological definition, organic means that it is something relating to or derived from living matter. So that one's organic too.
And if we take a more artistic standpoint, organic means denoting a relation between elements of something such that they fit together harmoniously as necessary parts of a whole.
One could argue that the added antifreeze proteins are necessary parts of the whole carrot because they keep the carrot alive, even if they were added by humans.
Organic, from our postmodern hipster standpoint, means that it was something raised without the use of chemical fertilizers, pesticides, or other agents.
You know, the things that keep these plants alive, keep bugs away, and help produce healthier organisms that survive longer.
How do we and how can we genetically modify our plants at home?
The process of creating a genetically modified organism starts with a single cell. A scientist inserts a strand of DNA containing the coding region of a gene into the nucleus of a single cell. The DNA being used for the modification is so small that it can't be seen, even under the world's most powerful microscope. Despite how tiny a cell is, there is a massive amount of DNA all packaged into its nucleus. To give some idea of just how much DNA is packed into that small space, if you were to take all the DNA of one single corn cell out of the nucleus and line it up end to end, it would be about 6 feet long, just a little bit shorter than Steph Curry. The small insertion of DNA coding region of our desired protein, color change, enzyme, or natural pesticide often only changes or adds a few nucleotidic base pairs. The other coding regions of the organism's genetic code remains completely unchanged by the process. In other words, we are simply adding in a desired trait to our organism while keeping every other component of our plant or animal the same. Once this single cell's DNA has been modified, it will be treated with naturally occurring plant hormones to stimulate growth and development. This is a similar mechanism that is used to produce Canadian beef. We are not adding any novel or harmful steroids or hormones, we are simply increasing the production of the already naturally occurring hormones. It's exactly like steroids with baseball players. They're not adding new chemicals into their body, they're simply increasing the ones that produce muscle so that they fail to enter the Baseball Hall of Fame. Sorry, Barry. Back to our cell. The one strand of DNA within the one nucleus within the one cell will start to divide. The resulting cells will begin to take on specialized functions of the inserted DNA until they become a part of the whole plant. It's sort of like the board game Pandemic, where one disease spreads across the entire world. But in this case, a favorably inserted gene is spreading and making the plant or animal more sustainable, prolific, and healthy.
Humans have been altering the genetics of organisms for over 30,000 years. While our ancestors had no concept of genetics, they were still able to influence the DNA of other organisms by a process called selective breeding or artificial selection. These terms, coined by Charles Darwin, describe the process of choosing the organisms with the most desired traits and mating them with the intention of combining and propagating these traits through their offspring. Repeated use of this practice over many generations can result in dramatic genetic changes to a species. While artificial selection is not what we typically consider GMO technology today, it is still the precursor to the modern processes and the earliest example of our species influencing genetics.
So the third question that we want to ask is, how can we bring genetic modification into the classroom? Bringing genetic modification into the classroom seems like a daunting or scary task. However, it's actually pretty straightforward. You could experiment with crossbreeding plants in the school garden, but the potential danger of crossbreeding live plants in a school garden is that it could take many generations for the plants to start showing signs of the genetic modifications or adaptations that are occurring. Furthermore, if the genetic modification is something that impacts the functionality of the plant and not its appearance, the students will not be able to visually see that the adaptation has happened. So why would we engage in this conversation in the classroom? The plan with our garden would be to introduce the fundamental concepts of genetic modification, which is a part of the Saskatchewan curriculum for Biology 30 Outcome BI 30 GB1, which says explore classical, Mendelian, and current chromosomal understandings of biological inheritance. Specifically, we would want to show students the difference between genetically modified foods and then naturally occurring / organic foods. The students be able to see and taste the difference between a genetically modified organism and a natural food. A proposed method of doing so would be to grow simple vegetables like carrots, beans, peas, or potatoes. Half the crop would be natural and half the crop would be species that have been genetically modified in some way. The idea is to give students exposure and more experience with food in the classroom, and to give them the experience with genetic modification to increase their knowledge of what they are putting into their bodies. Having the students see their food being grown, witnessing the differences both in taste and in growth patterns, would give students the exposure to the horrifying methodologies of genetic modification. We want our students to be aware of the often political and superficial claims that companies make to say that their product is healthier or more natural by seeing these foods grown firsthand. To give the students practical, local experience with genetic modification, we also wanted to provide them with hands-on experience in the science realm. To do so, we are proposing that students have the opportunity to genetically modify some safe bacteria, E. coli. As noted earlier, the risk of genetically modifying a plant grown in the classroom is the timing of the growth, and the necessary change in appearance to be labeled as change. The University of Saskatchewan Department of Biochemistry runs a lab where students take E. coli fixed with green fluorescent protein, GFP. You may remember this diagram from earlier. And what they do is they make a small and simple genetic modification at 3 nucleotidic sites and change the green bacteria to blue. The process for genetically modifying the bacteria is simple and quick. Though it is not a totally accurate comparison of food, it serves to represent to the students that out of a 3,300 base pair bacteria, changing only 3 base pairs can change the appearance and potentially better the bacteria's chance of surviving. The fourth question that we want to ask is, are A&W's burgers healthier or safer because of the lack of genetic modification that happened in the cattle?
Purchase of fries or fresh onion rings every Wednesday until May 14th. 99-cent Matzo Wednesday.
A&W's ad campaign that was established in 2013 is as follows. At A&W, we're on a journey to source simple, great-tasting ingredients farmed with care. We're proud to have high standards when it comes to our food, and you can taste it in everything we serve. It's all part of our commitment to serve you food you can feel good about. For us, great burgers come first, so it's only natural that we're the first and only national burger restaurant in Canada to serve beef raised without the use of hormones or steroids. We're also the first and only national burger restaurant in Canada to serve chicken raised without the use of antibiotics. Our eggs are farmed right here in Canada from hens fed a vegetarian diet without animal byproducts. We're also proud to serve organic, fair trade coffee blended for us by master roaster Van Hoot.
But what exactly is the difference? Farm Progress describes the practice as small pellets of growth-promoting hormones implanted under the animal's ear. These hormones are primarily estrogen, testosterone, or progesterone. These implants change what happens to the nutrients the beef cattle consume by enhancing muscle growth and diminishing fat deposition, lowering the amount of feed needed for each animal. The main reason for the use of implants is for efficiency. They increase the rate of pounds gained per pound of feed consumed. In fact, if we didn't use tiny implants, it would take 12% more cattle, 11% more feed, and 10% more land to produce the same amount of beef as we are producing today. It would also mean 10% more greenhouse gases because of the increased manure. This saves beef producers money by increasing rate of gain and lowering the amount of feed needed for finishing cattle. Farm Progress cited a study completed by Ron Lemanager, a Purdue University Extension beef specialist. He said there is only a very slight increase in excess estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone in the meat of treated animals and is insignificant compared to what humans produce naturally in a day. According to Andrew Campbell from Real Agriculture, the bun on the burger would contain more estrogen than a beef patty treated with added hormones. And when he says more estrogen, he means significantly more. A pound of untreated beef has about 5 nanograms of estrogen, while a pound of treated beef has about 7. Is 2 nanograms a big difference? Not if you look at the fact that your body very naturally produces 136,000 nanograms of estrogen in a day if you're a man, and 513,000 nanograms per day if you're a woman. Peanuts contain 100,000 nanograms, and tofu contains 113 million nanograms. And white bread, aka the bun your burger comes on, contains 300,000 nanograms of estrogen per pound. The Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations cited a study completed at Iowa State University that the difference contributed to the body by hormone-treated beef compared to what you produce on your own is about 0.00025%. So are A&W burgers healthier or safer? Looking at the facts, it seems more like a marketing scheme than a valid concern for any consumer.
As you can see, there's a lot of factors that come into play with genetic modification, and as emphasized by our example with A&W, the majority of the genetic modification that is done in plants and animals has an extremely minimal impact on the food we consume. Rather, the genetic modifications ensure that our food can grow stronger, faster, healthier, and more nutritious to prevent wasted resources.
Ensuring students are aware of the benefits of genetic modification is a critical component of food literacy in secondary education. Was this video intended to slam A&W for their campaign? No.
In fact, we both enjoyed a hearty meal at A&W, and as evidenced by the customer satisfaction tablet they had in-house, so did everyone else. This video was intended to raise awareness of political and superficial claims regarding food that organic is better and that raised without hormones is somehow meaningful, or that natural is a holy and sacred word dedicated to the world's best food.
We have developed and modified technologies to make farming easier and eating healthier, with genetic modification being the primary platform for those successes. If the benefits far outweigh the made-up risks, why would we ever question the validity or safety of a genetically modified food or animal?